Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be filming one of my most favorite videos of the year to do because it's going to be my best books of 2021. These are all of the top favorites that I have read this year. I narrowed it down to my top 15, but I do also have some honorable mentions because it was really hard to narrow this list down because I had such an amazing reading year. But however, before we do jump into the books, I wanted to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor because it's Likewise! And I'm so excited to be working with Likewise because I genuinely use Likewise in my day-to-day life. It can be really hard to figure out what you want to watch on Netflix when you're just doom scrolling through a million different things that you can watch, but it's really great because Likewise recommends you different books, movies, TV shows, or podcasts based on things that you've previously enjoyed. They're powered by a combination of smart technology and real human recommendations, and it's so easy because you just download the app, which is free to do by the way, and then you go in there and you like a bunch of different books or movies or TV shows that you've previously enjoyed, and based on what you've liked, it will give you daily recommendations of different books or movies or podcasts or TV shows that it thinks that you should check out just because you've liked things that are similar to it before. It's also really convenient and really cool because you can ask the audience on the Likewise app to help you find certain things. So like if you're looking for a book that has a certain trope, you can just pop into the ask box and ask the community, hey, what's a book with this trope? And then people can give you recommendations of books with that specific trope. They also have a lot of really fun lists that you can go through on there. One of my favorite ones that I discovered is this list called 25 rom-coms that prove fake relationships is the best trope, because I do genuinely love that trope in movies, and I'm so excited to find this list that has 25 movies. Because of the Likewise app, I was able to discover two of my new favorite podcasts. One of them is OC Swingers. I finished that whole thing so freaking fast. And then I also discovered the No Sleep podcast because it was recommended to me on the Likewise front page. I also really like that you can create your own list too, so you can organize everything very neatly. I have created lists for like my all-time favorite thrillers, my all-time favorite books, like different things like that, and it's just so satisfying. I swear when I first downloaded this app, I spent like the entire day just going through and liking all of my favorite things. It was just so much fun. So yeah, if you want to get some great recommendations while supporting my channel at the same time, you can go to on.likewise.com/gabbyreads and use the link at the top of my description to download the app today. The best part is that it's 100% free to do, and you can follow me on the app. My username is gabbyreads, so go ahead and click the link and I will see you over there. And thank you so much once again to Likewise for sponsoring today's video. And now let's get into the books, shall we? Before we get into my top 15 books of the year, I just wanted to go through some honorable mentions because, as I said, it was so hard to narrow down this list, and I have so many honorable mentions for books that I really enjoyed this year. Okay, so the first honorable mention has got to be Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. Also, Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. And then I have The X-Talk, The Book of Accidents, Local Woman Missing, The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, When the Reckoning Comes, A Lot's Away, Follow Me to Ground, We Need to Do Something, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, The Plot, as well as The Maidens. And I know you're probably surprised that some of these books didn't make it into my top 15, but that just goes to show how incredible of a reading year that I had because I found it really hard to narrow down this list. Right, so let's just cut right to it, shall we? We got a lot to get through here. Coming in at number 15 is going to be The Hunting Wives by May Cobb, and this is a book that I get a lot of shit for loving. I'm not totally sure why because I just had the most fun reading this book this summer. This one has just one of my favorite atmospheres in a thriller where we're following this group of moms who are very, you know, Mean Girls energy, and that's just kind of my favorite thing in books. I love the like suburban gossip mom drama vibes. Also, I love the fact that this book, we follow this character Sophie, who is like new to the town in Texas, and she's starting to become obsessed with this woman named Margot Banks, who's basically like the Regina George of this group of moms. And I don't know, I just personally thought this book was so much fun. It was everything that I was hoping it would be, and it just had major like small town gossip kind of like drama between the moms, and there was like some scandalous things happening in this book. I just thought it was so entertaining, and because of that, it ended up being one of my favorites of the year. Like, was the ending my favorite? No. But did I have the best time reading this book? Yes! Coming in at number 14 is going to be Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This is another thriller that I just had an absolute blast reading this book this year. I not only love this book because of the atmosphere, because it all takes place in this like snowy chapel that's like out in the middle of nowhere, and it was very spooky at times because they were wondering like, is this chapel haunted or like what's going on, because some weird things things were happening. And also I love the talk about like the film industry in this, because the husband is a screenwriter in this, and he's been like a really successful screenwriter, and he's worked for some big names in the film industry. So I loved the conversation about that in this book. And also I'm just kind of obsessed with the way that this story is told, because we follow this couple who is, you know, they've been married for 10 years now, but they're like on the brink of divorce. Like they're just not in love with each other anymore. And so they go to this chapel in an attempt to, you know, try to save what's left of their marriage. But then in alternate chapters while they're going on this trip, we get to see the letters that she's written to her husband over the last 10 years. And so we kind of get to see like what started to go wrong in their marriage leading up to this trip. And it's just such a well-written book. Oh my god, the ending of this book has some of the most wild plot twists, and it has like that double twist that I always talk about, where you think you know what's going on and then there's a twist and there's another twist and you're just like, your brain is just spinning. Yeah, that's my favorite shit, so I ended up loving this. I just can't get over the atmosphere in this book. The characters were just really interesting. I just loved it so much. Like, this is definitely my favorite Alice Feeney. Alright, coming in at number 13 is going to be Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. I'm so excited that this book is on this list, because this is a book that I actually read because of your recommendations. This book was actually recommended to me in a reading vlog that I did this year called Reading Your Horror Recommendations, and y'all came through with this one because this ended up being one of the scariest books that I've ever read. I was reading this at night and I actually slept with my freaking lights on because I was terrified. And I think something that's great about this book is that it's scary from the freaking prologue. Like, just the prologue alone can stand as its own kind of like short story that's scary. And it's very effective, and I was very scared just from the prologue. But I also think this book plays on a lot of different fears that I have, and the main one is being like somebody kind of talking in their sleep, and like something to do with like sleeping time, and there's like spooky things happening, but also like the idea of being able to hear voices like out in the woods, or being able to see shadows and like nothing's there. Yeah, absolutely terrifying. I think something that's extra scary about this is the fact that they're kind of like, it's like an isolated thing, you know, where they're in this cabin and it's snowing, there's a blizzard and they can't leave the cabin, and it's just terrifying. I just had so much fun reading this book this year, and I was genuinely scared. Like, this is going down as one of the top horror books that have actually scared me the most, so that's exciting. And then switching gears here, going into number 12 is going to be Hang the Moon by Alexandria Bellafleur. This author just keeps getting better with every romance book that she comes out with, because, you know, last year she had Written in the Stars, which I really, really enjoyed that book, but it didn't make it into like my top faves of the year. But this one, oof! This book was so cute, and I feel like this one might have been a situation where I enjoyed it as much as I did, because I feel like I read this book at the perfect time. Because if you didn't know, I took a trip with my mom to Seattle this year, and on that trip I actually bought this book, and I got to visit all of the iconic places in Seattle during that trip, like Pike Place and the Gum Wall and all that stuff. And then I started reading this book that night when I came home, and for some reason I didn't realize that this book also takes place in Seattle, and these characters were doing all of the things that I had just done, you know, that day. So they were also going to Pike Place and the Gum Wall and doing all of the Seattle tourism things, and I was like, what the heck? It was just so freaking cool. So it made my enjoyment of the book like 10 times what it probably would have been otherwise, because I was like, I just did this stuff today, like how cool. But also the romance in this book was just so soft. It was just so good, and these characters were just so freaking cute. Like, I just absolutely adore them. I was smiling this entire book, and I love the fact that in this book we're following the character Brendan, who is the brother of Darcy from Written in the Stars. So I love that we're following like the same group of characters, you know, like we see characters who are familiar to us from the first book in this one. And I just love this series. Like, I'm just obsessed. I know this author has another book coming out next year, and I just can't freaking wait. And I love that not only do her books take place in Seattle, which is really cool because I live in Washington, but also because I love how she uses like astronomy and astrology in all of her books, because those are things that I'm very interested in. And so I just love it so much. And then at number 11, I have another romance, because it's People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. In this book, you know, as I mentioned in my most surprising books of the year, this is not one that I expected to love as much as I did. Because not only did I find Beach Read to be pretty disappointing, which was this author's previous book, but also because friends to lovers is one of my least favorite tropes in romance books. But this book, oh my gosh, it knocked it out of the park. And I think something that's really cool about this book is that we're following these two best friends, Alex and Poppy, and they have been best friends since college, but every summer they go on these vacations together once a year. And so it's really fun because not only do we get to see like how they met when they were in college, which I think is something that's super important for me to be able to see, to like root for a romance. Like I want to see the very early stages of their friendship and relationship, but then we also get to see all of their vacations that they've taken together over their last 10 years, and it's just so much fun. It's like the most perfect escapism. It just made me want to go and like be on a beach so badly, but also their romance was just so adorable, and Alex is like the biggest cinnamon roll ever. I just adored him. And this book just made me smile so much, and I just genuinely loved it. Like, I can see myself rereading this. Getting into the top 10, this is exciting. Coming in at number 10 is actually a book that I read this month. Like, this book just snuck its way onto my top 10 because it's incredible, because it's A History of Wild Places. Oh my gosh, I can't even deal with how much I love this book because it's so fresh right now, you know, for me. And I haven't really gotten the chance to tell you how much I love this book yet. Holy shit. I went into this book kind of nervous because I wasn't sure if it was going to be my thing or not, because all I had heard about it is that it involves some magical realism, and I was expecting it to be a little bit more fantasy than it was for some reason. This book has one of the most interesting mysteries that I've read this year, and one of my favorite plot twists that I've read this year. So in this book, if you didn't know what it was even about, we're following this man named Travis, who he has this skill where he helps find missing people, because when he touches certain objects, he can like get visions and see what they were doing in like their final moments or something like that. And so he gets hired to try and find this children's author who just recently went missing, but her books, like the children's author, her books were very dark and disturbing, and people like she was very controversial because people would be like, those are inappropriate for children. He tries to go and find where she went, and it leads him to this group of people that live out in the forest. And then Travis ends up going missing around the same area that the author went missing. And so now, years and years later, we're following this man named Theo who lives with this group of forest people, and this life is all that he's ever known. And one day he discovers Travis's truck that's like out there, and he's like, what's going on with this? And oh my god, this book was just so good. It was just so unexpected. I loved the writing. Like, the writing was absolutely so haunting and so atmospheric, and it just immediately draws you in. I was obsessed with these characters. I was so invested in knowing what was going on in this mystery and what was happening. And I think this group of people that was living in this forest, like, they were just so interesting to read about, and like what they were doing out there and some of the things that they believe. It was just absolutely fascinating. I also was not expecting to cry at the end of this book, but I did. And you know, like I said, it has one of my favorite plot twists that I've read this year. I was not expecting for it to go that way, and I was just so floored. Alright, coming in at number 9 is my favorite romance book that I've read this year, because it's The Charm Offensive. I had to put this one in my top 10, you know, because this book just made me so freaking happy when I read this book this summer. And in this book, we're following this guy named Charlie, who is basically going to be the equivalent of The Bachelor. You know, like, it's all about this show that's kind of similar to The Bachelor, but Charlie really suffers with anxiety, and this is not something that he really wants to do. And this is a story about how he starts to fall for his male producer named Dev, and this book is just everything. Like, I am such a sucker. Like, I love books that have this kind of trope where like there's a Bachelor-like show and then like something unexpected happens. It's just one of my favorite things ever, and I think this was always my dream premise for a book, is that we get a male bachelor who starts to fall for a male producer instead of one of the female contestants. And this book was just chef's kiss. It was everything that I could have asked for with this trope. But I also love the discussion about mental health in this book and how much it normalizes anxiety and depression and different things like that. Like, it was just so nice to see these things so normalized in a romance novel like this. And I just absolutely love Dev and Charlie so much. Like, they just genuinely made me so happy, and like there were so many moments in this book that were just so precious. I even have on my bulletin board in my room, I have these little character cards that they sent me that are so cute, and those have been on my bulletin board like since the summer, because I just look at it every day and think about how much I love this book. Alright, and coming in at number 8 is going to be Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. Oof! This is one of my favorite thrillers that I've read this year, and this is shocking because it's a revenge thriller, which I don't usually consider consider to be my thing, but this book has some of the most powerful discussions I think that I've read in a book this year, because in this book we're following these two characters named Ike and Buddy, and these men are both ex-cons, and then one day the police show up on their doorstep and let them know that both of their gay sons have been murdered in broad daylight. And so this is a story about how these two ex-con fathers are going out there to get revenge for their sons, and they're going after the men who were responsible for this. But I think the thing that makes this book so interesting and like provides such great discussion is the fact that these dads were not necessarily supportive of their sons' sexualities and their lifestyles. And I think there's also a lot of really great conversation about what it means to be gay in America, what it means to be black in America. There's just so many great moments in this book where Ike and Buddy have the opportunity for growth with their characters, and I just think it was really beautiful and it was so well done, and I freaking cried at the end of this book. Oh my god, like the tears, it's not a joke. And I just grew such a love for both Ike and Buddy by the end of this book. Like they just became one of my favorite, most iconic duos. I will also say that this book is a lot more graphically violent than I anticipated it would be. Like this is not for like the faint of heart, you know, because there were some scenes in this I was like, holy shit, like it was violent. But also it was just so great that I didn't mind, you know, it needed it. It was very gritty and dark, kind of like True Detective, like it had that kind of energy. Amazing, so freaking good. By the end of this book, I was an emotional wreck. Alright, coming in at number 7 is another thriller that I'm just so freaking excited about because it's in my dreams. I Hold a Knife. You guys knew this was coming, right? You knew this book would be on this list because this book was one of my favorite reading experiences that I had this year because I just had so much fun with this book. And this book is just so fascinating, you know, because we're following this group of 6 friends who they went to college like back in the day, right? Like 10 years ago or something. And then when they were all in college, one of their friends was murdered and another one of their friends was accused of that murder. Now we're following them 10 years later when they're all coming back to the college for like a reunion of sorts, and they're trying to figure out what actually happened to their friend and who actually murdered them. It's just, oh my god, the vibe of this book was just everything. I was really obsessed with this group of friends. The thing that makes this book so wild is the fact that I didn't even like the main character very much. Like Jessica is one of my least favorite characters in this book, but she's also just so fascinating. Like she's so narcissistic and like manipulative in ways, but like I was also obsessed with reading from her point of view. I don't know, I just thought the mystery aspect of this book was so interesting. It was so fun. I loved the atmosphere of all of this, you know, taking place on this college campus. It's not like dark academia, but it's like pretty damn close, you know? It was very addictive, and I also was on board for the love triangle that was happening in this book, which like, when do I ever give a shit about a love triangle in a thriller novel? Ever. But in this book, I did. I was here for it. Alright, and then coming in at number 6 is going to be Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is, without a doubt, one of my favorite horror books that I've read this year because this book is just everything. Basic premise of this book just says a woman trapped on a mountain attempts to survive more than one kind of monster. Not only is she trapped in this cabin with this man who is, you know, very abusive to her, and it's not fun to read about that, but also she's trapped because they believe that there's some kind of monster creature out there on the mountain with them. And it's just so terrifying because you don't know. It's kind of like Bird Box, you know, where it's like, what is it? They don't know. They can't see it, but they can hear it. But they know it's not a bear because they know it's bigger than a bear. And this book is just, it's so suspenseful and so mysterious, and it has a really great plot twist in this book as well. I actually reread this book in the month of December because of how much I freaking love it, and I loved it just the same the second time around. I just really love the snowy, spooky atmosphere of this book. But I will warn you that, you know, the abuse in this book is a lot, and it's kind of hard to read about. So if that's a trigger for you, then maybe I would not recommend this one. But otherwise, this book was just so intense. Like, it was literally one of the most suspenseful books. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. And also, I really love the way that this book ends. I know that some people are like not satisfied with the way that this book ends, but I think it was like the perfect ending. Right, now on to the top 5. This is getting down to it. I'm sure you can probably predict some of the books that are in my top 5, but I think you'll be surprised by my number one. So coming in at number 5 is going to be The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I'm sure that this one is no surprise because I haven't shut up about this book all year long. I read this in January for Winterween. It was actually one of the first books that I read this year, but I've not been able to stop thinking about this book all year long. And then because of my love for this book, I ended up picking up like 3 more books by Jennifer McMahon this year. And this one will still remain as my favorite and probably always will. And something that I think that Jennifer McMahon is so freaking good at is the fact that she has 2 timelines usually going. One of them is usually very historical and then one of them is in the present day. But the way that she's able to like weave these 2 timelines together is just incredible. I also love the fact that she includes sisters in every single one of her books. She's basically like the Karen Slaughter of horror, but like not as graphically violent. I mean, some of her books are a little violent, but she's not like graphically violent like Karen Slaughter, but she's really good at writing sister relationships in the way that Karen Slaughter is. And in this book, we do get a point of view that's in the year 1908. Like, it is very historical in this one, but we're following this family in that timeline. And then we do also get a present day point of view that's following this other family that lives in the same town as the people from the 1908 chapters. And I was obsessed with both timelines in this book. I was really invested in what was going on in the 1908 chapters and in the present day chapters. And basically, we're just living in this town where like these people have gone missing and they don't know exactly what's going on. Like, some people in the town have speculated that it's like aliens, or like they just don't know where these missing people have gone. And this book is just absolutely fantastic. Like, I will highly recommend this book if you love Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This has similar vibes, and like, dare I say that I enjoyed this one even more than Pet Sematary. It was just so good, so thought-provoking, and also there was some seriously spooky ass shit in this book, okay? There was this one scene that I still think about to this day. When I read it, I slept with the lights on because I was just staring at my closet like if you know, you know. Oh, this book is just so good. Oh my god, I want to reread it. Alright, coming in at number 4 is going to be The Push. Ooh, this is another one that I actually did end up rereading in the month of December because I just love it so much. And this one is marketed as a thriller, but I would really call this a psychological drama, as it says on the inside flap here, because I think if you go into this expecting, you know, your typical thriller, you're probably going to be disappointed because this one's much more of a slow burn character study into the mind of this mother. But this is just one of the best written books that I've read this year, and I just love how smart and clever this book is because there's multiple meanings for this title even. I feel like this book has every single fear that I've ever had about parenthood mentioned in this. Like, not only the idea of like a labor just being so freaking awful and terrible, but the idea of like not really connecting with your child and feeling like fear of your child. You regret the decision to even become a parent in the first place. Like, that is terrifying. And there's a lot of that in this book. I honestly would not recommend this book to new parents or to anybody that's expecting to be new parents anytime soon because this was a lot. But I personally just thought this book was so fascinating. Like, it's just so well done. We'll say that it is very dark. So like, there's a lot of trigger warnings for things like postpartum depression and, you know, different things like that. I feel like the thriller aspect of this book for me really comes into that last 30% of this book. Like, by the last 30%, it starts to feel like a thriller, like the typical kind of thrillers that you might read. And I was just so invested and so shocked. Like, this book has one of those last sentence plot twists, or like last sentences that make you gasp out loud, that you're like horrified. Oh my god. Even the second time that I read this year, I knew it was coming and I still got full body chills when I read that last line of this book. It is just so effective and so worth it. And I just love it. I love The Push so much. I just think it's a really smart and cleverly written book. And the writing is absolutely gorgeous in some parts. Like, it almost reads like literary fiction kind of style at times. Like, it's just really gorgeously written. Alright, coming in at number 3 is going to be The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. Kristen Hanna is like the one historical fiction author that I just connect with. You know, her books really hit me. I actually made an entire video dedicated to this book earlier this year, so you can see all of my thoughts. If you want to see it, I'll link it down below. But this book had me bawling my eyes out. Like, I think this book is the hardest that I've cried over a book this year, and so for that reason alone, it's gotta be in my top 3. Because Kristen Hanna is really good at writing historical fiction that makes me want to learn more about the history of the subjects that she's she's writing on, because this book takes place during the Great Depression in America and during the Dust Bowl. And this protagonist, Elsa, is just one of my favorite protagonists that I've read this year. Like, I just immediately connected with her and I felt so much for her character. And Elsa just had to make so many difficult decisions and sacrifices in this book, and this book will also really make you feel so humble and so grateful for all that you have in your life. And I think that that's another reason why it ended up being one of my absolute favorites of this year. I also really love the complicated mother-daughter relationship that is explored within this book. I don't know, I keep thinking about the ending of this book and how much it affected me. Like, the epilogue, I was just sobbing the entire time I was reading the epilogue. And I love the way that Kristen Hanna writes about women in history, you know, because she talks about how so often the things that women do in history just get so overlooked by the accomplishments of all the men during that era. So I love that she writes these stories about women who made sacrifices during this time. Oh my god, I love this so much. And then when I read the author's note at the end, I just loved it even more. And Kristen Hanna, she's like the only author that I will gravitate and immediately want to pick up her historical fiction books because they just bring out something in me. Alright, getting down to my top 2. Holy crap. Okay, number 2 is going to be Finlay. Donovan is killing it. My love for this book is immense. This book is the most fun that I had reading a thriller this year because Finlay's character is just one of my favorite characters. And this book is about how Finlay Donovan is a writer, which, you know, we all know that I love books that follow writers, no surprises here. And one day she's sitting in a Panera Bread talking with her agent about her next book, which is going to be, you know, a crime thriller book. And somebody overhears her in the Panera Bread and they think she's talking about real life murder. And so then they offer her $50,000 to kill her husband. And Finlay is a single mother who could really use the money, you know? And this book is just, oh my god, it's just so much fun. It has one of the most iconic duos in a book. It's very like Dead to Me vibes, you know, where like these women accidentally get signed up to do these crazy crimes and things. And I guess this book could be described as like a cozy mystery, which honestly I thought would not be my thing because I tend to cringe when books, you know, get this kind of like cozy mystery vibe. I definitely prefer my thrillers to be on like the darker, more serious side, but this book was just so much fun. It just had like the best writing style. I just absolutely adored Finlay's character, and honestly all of the characters in this book were so wholesome, and I loved like the side romance that was going on in this book. Like, there was just so much to love about it. I also love the fact that it ends on this note where you're just like, excuse me, what? And the fact that we're gonna get 4 books in this series, like, you have no idea how happy this makes me because I just love this book so much, and the fact that we're gonna get to see more of these characters and this story, it just makes my heart so freaking happy, you know? It was so great. And so yeah, Finlay Donovan is killing it. Have you read it? Because if not, you should. Finally, time! My number 1 favorite book of the year. I think that this book is really shocking that it's my number 1 because it's something that's like slightly out of my comfort zone. But yeah, it's amazing because it's Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I know this is probably going to be a lot of people's favorite book of 2021, but I think it's a little bit surprising for me that it's my number 1 because as much as I loved The Martian, I don't even think it made it into like my top 5 if I remember correctly. And this book, I went into it thinking that I would like it, but I did not go into this book thinking that I was going to love it the way that I did. And I think that this is shocking because it's slightly outside of my comfort zone. You know, sci-fi is not something that I read a lot of. You know, if you can see this top 15, there's literally no sci-fi on this list. There's not even sci-fi in my honorable mentions, you know, it's not a genre that I read very often, but there was just something about this book, dude. Like, I freaking loved this. This is the only book that I read this year that had me laughing out loud like multiple times. Like, I just love Andy Weir's sense of humor. And in this story, if you have no idea what this is even about, we're following this main character named Ryland who is out in space, and he wakes up on this spaceship. He has no memory of like what his own name even is. He doesn't know where he is. The whole crew on the ship with him is dead, and he's just trying to figure out like what the fuck happened and what's going on. And it was just the most entertaining shit. And you know what sucks is that it's really hard to talk about this book without getting into spoilers because there's so many surprising things about this book that you probably wouldn't expect going into it. And so that's why I don't want to get into too much detail about why this is my favorite book of the year, but I think if you've read this book, you would probably know why it's my favorite book of the year, because there's a main friendship that happens in this book that is just It's like the softest thing that I've ever read, and I absolutely adore this character. I also love how we do get some like flashback scenes to like what was happening on Earth and like why he even had to go out to space in the first place. Like there's definitely some discussion about that I thought was so fascinating. It's like crazy to me that I don't read sci-fi more often because I'm such a freaking nerd for astronomy. Like I love outer space shit, okay? Like anything outer space, freaking love it. But I think a lot of the times why I don't pick up sci-fi is because a lot of times sci-fi tends to blend with fantasy and then I don't end up liking it as much. But this one feels a lot more, you know, sci-fi that's like grounded in reality a little bit more, if that makes sense. I love this book so much. Like Ryland is definitely one of my favorite characters that I've read in this book, as well as the friendship in this book, that character as well. And I don't know, I had the best time reading this. Like this one stirred up so many emotions in me because I was laughing at one time and then I was crying and then I was like so invested in any moments where there was suspense. Yeah, I don't know, the ending of this book, it just made my heart grow 10 sizes, you know? It made my black heart feel something. And that's pretty incredible. So yeah, Project Hail Mary, I think it was my favorite book this year. It was really hard, you know, to figure out this top list because honestly, like all of these books that were in my top 5, they all could have been my number 1 book because I just love them all so much. But I think I just went with this one because this one just made me feel so much, and just every time I think about it, I'm just like, oh my god, it's just the best. So yeah, there you have it, my top 15 favorite books of the year. Please let me know if any of these books would also make it into your top favorites of the year. And of course, let me know what were your top favorite books that you read in 2021. What were the best books that you read this year? I would love to know. Leave them in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching, as always, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.